This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. This is Roger Stone on the Red Apple Audio Network, and this is the Roger Stone Show. Here we eat, sleep, and breathe politics. Well, that's because I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, starting with Nixon, all the way through 3 campaigns for the great Ronald Reagan, and of course, Donald J. Trump. As Election Day nears, we are looking at one of the closest, most hard-fought, and unpredictable presidential races in our country's history. I do think this is in many ways going to be different than 2020. In recent days, we have seen the Republicans move very aggressively in the state of Pennsylvania over the issue of early voting, and certain counties, such as Bucks County, cutting off the line well before the 5 o'clock cutoff. In fact, they cut off the line one day last week at 1:54. The Republicans then went into federal court and got a ruling that extended early voting by 3 days in what is truly a swing county. Early reports, however, are that those showing up for the early voting are disproportionately Republicans. We also saw a sweeping Supreme Court victory for Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia, who challenged a Department of Justice decision that would not have allowed those who are truly unqualified to vote based on their lack of U.S. citizenship from being removed from the ballot. So in many ways, this election is looking more like it will be a free, fair, honest, transparent election. But for anyone out there who thinks that this is already decided, or that it's a landslide for their candidate, or that it's somehow in the bag, I implore you to get out there and vote. Republican Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, of course, a former 4-term Democrat Congresswoman from Hawaii, former vice chairman of the Democrat National Committee, who finally left her party. She's written a great book called For Love of Country, Leaving the Democrat Party Behind. I wanted to have her on today's show, but was unable to do so. Well, because she's in the U.S. Army Reserve, where she serves as a lieutenant colonel, having served her country in combat in both Kuwait and Iraq. And unfortunately, she is on military duty today and unable to join us. But here's a bite of Tulsi Gabbard at Madison Square Garden, just to give you some example of what I'm talking about.
Hello, New York! Join me as I say these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As we gather here today on this historic occasion, we stand together as proud Americans in understanding that these very rights are under attack. So we face this historic crossroads where our freedom and our future is in our hands. There's never been a more clear choice in any election in my life, and our ability to live in a truly peaceful and free and prosperous country is on the line. I love you too. And it is that love that brings us together here today, that love for freedom, that love for our country and love for each other as fellow Americans, as children of God, that compels us to take action to save our country and defend our freedom. Now, this choice that we have before us is very personal to me. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve. I've served now for over 21 years. I've deployed to different war zones 3 times over that period, and I've seen the cost of war. For my brothers and sisters who paid the ultimate price, I carry their memories and their sacrifice in my heart every day. So this choice that we have before us as Americans is critical. It's important to us. It's important to those of us who serve, who have volunteered to put our lives on the line for the safety, security, and freedom of our country and our people, and it's critical to all of us. Here is the choice that we have. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, and it's a vote for war, more war, likely World War III and nuclear war. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them, and who has demonstrated already that he has the courage and strength to stand up and fight for peace. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for open borders, where known violent criminals and Islamist terrorists are streaming across our borders, placing us at risk. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for secure borders and safe communities, and a confidence that he will seek out those who seek to do us harm and get them out. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for economic hardship, high cost of living, poverty, and homelessness. And a vote for Donald Trump is a vote for economic prosperity and opportunity for every single one of us as Americans. A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for censorship and a complete erosion of our fundamental and constitutional rights and freedoms. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for someone who will defend freedom and every one of our God-given rights that are enshrined in the Constitution and Bill of Rights. So the choice is ours. History will look back on us at this moment for the choice that we make. Did we choose war or peace? Did we choose poverty or prosperity? Did we choose censorship or freedom? Our freedom and our future is in our hands. We have just a few days left to complete this no-fail mission that we have before us to save our country. Nothing short of our future is on the line. So now, just as we've gathered here today in this historic place and this historic time, we will gather together all across this country, people of every race, ethnicity, religion, and creed, to stand together and defend our freedom and ensure our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now is the time for us to send Donald Trump back to the White House to be the 47th President of the United States, where we can stand together and make America great again. Thank you so much. Let's get it done. Aloha.
So Hillary's called us deplorables. The Department of Justice calls parents who are concerned about their children's curriculum in the public schools domestic terrorists. And now Joe Biden says we're all garbage. We're going to talk about it all today on The Roger Stone Show. So don't touch that dial.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. It's Roger Stone on the Red Apple Audio Network. Incredibly, the Associated Press tells us that the White House actually altered the record of President Joe Biden's garbage remark, despite the fact that the official White House stenographer objected. The AP reports that White House press officials altered the official transcript of a call in which President Joe Biden appeared to take a swipe at supporters of Donald Trump, drawing objections from the federal workers whose job it is to document such remarks for posterity. This, according to two U.S. government officials, and evidently an internal email that was obtained last Thursday by the Associated Press. President Biden created an uproar this week with his remarks to Latino activists, according to racist comments made by a roast comedian, Toby Hinchcliffe, who referred to the U.S. island territory Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. I stress to you, of course, that President Trump nor anyone on his team said that and quickly renounced those comments. The latest polls show, by the way, no change in the historic level of votes that Trump is getting among Hispanic voters. A new poll in Florida, where there's a very large Puerto Rican constituency, mostly in the southern and central part of the state, showed that Trump's support among Puerto Rican voters moved from +3 to +2. I think that's because the Biden garbage issue really has changed the news cycle so very quickly. The fact that the White House press office changed the transcript, this has actually never happened. They rendered his quote different by changing supporters, apostrophe S, to supporters with no apostrophe, which the president's aides sent that meant Biden was criticizing the roast comedian Hinchcliffe, not the millions of Americans who are supporting Trump for president. This did not, of course, cut it. President Donald Trump incredibly trolling the Democrats and the media by appearing in Wisconsin in a garbage truck and wearing an orange lineman's vest for those in the waste removal business. It really reinforces the entire narrative that the Republicans under Trump have become the party of working Americans, the party of the working class. Also, big controversy today over presidential transition head Howard Lutnick. Normally speaking, presidential transition heads are seen and not heard, but Lutnick gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal and then later to CNN in which he reaffirmed that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would be charged with overseeing CDC, FDA, the HHS, and other public entities involved with health. This is, of course, precisely why Donald Trump reached this alliance with him. This is not surprising. Now, it is amazing to me that CNN made a big deal of this, but one thing I can tell you after the experience of 2016, and that is that Donald Trump is going to make all of his own decisions regarding the key positions in his government. Knowing him for 45 years, I can tell you he's his own man. He marches to his own drummer. He's not told what to think, who to see, what to say, where to go. I think that's precisely why the American people elected him, because he's authentic, because he's genuine. And for those reasons, I'm unconcerned about Mr. Lutnick's comments. Lutnick was quoted as saying, "The president and I will be filling all the key positions in government." No, I think President Donald Trump will be the one doing that. In the meantime, there have been objections raised regarding comments by Democrats as to what will happen in the post-election period. I keep seeing these predictions that there will be violence post-election. Let's make one thing very, very clear. And I say this as a supporter of President Donald Trump. Violence is never the answer. As I told Politico earlier this week, if there are disputes regarding the election returns, disputes regarding election day anomalies or irregularities, or actual, hard, solid evidence of fraud, these matters need to be played out in the courts. That's what the courts are for. Now, I am hopeful that unlike 2020, when 21 state attorney generals asked the U.S. Supreme Court to review the election returns and they declined to do so, that the High Court will look at any questions that may arise. But any prediction or any provocation for violence is not the answer. We're going to break that and a lot more down today on The Roger Stone Show, right here on the Red Apple Audio Network. So I urge you, please don't touch that dial.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. This is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network, and joining us now is Caroline Leavitt. She was a candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District in 2022. I say that because I admire people who get in the arena, and Caroline Leavitt has certainly done so. After graduating from St. Anselm's College, she worked for President Donald Trump, serving as a presidential writer and assistant press secretary, and she currently serves as President Trump's national press secretary. Caroline, welcome to The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. It's great to be with you, as always.
You, of all people, must be more tired than others. You have worked very, very hard for what I think will be a victory. But today I want to address this jobs report that has been put out by the administration. A statement from the campaign this morning says, and I quote, "This jobs report is a catastrophe and definitively reveals how badly Kamala Harris broke our economy. In a single month, Kamala's failed economic agenda wiped out nearly 30,000 private sector jobs and nearly 50,000 manufacturing jobs. Working families are being ripped off by the Harris-Biden economic agenda. Kamala broke the economy. President Donald Trump will fix it." A smart woman named Caroline Levitt said that. Tell us more.
Oh, well, thank you, Roger. Yeah, the jobs report was less than ideal for the Harris-Biden administration, the Kamala campaign, but most importantly for our country. This is just another definitive sign that Kamala Harris is breaking our economy. Now, overall, the report, Roger, said that they added just 12,000 jobs, which was well below the 100,000 jobs that were expected. But even that number, I'm not so sure about, because as we know, this administration has notoriously revised the job numbers to make it look better. So I think once the revisions come out in a couple of months, we're actually going to see that we lost jobs this month. We know 46,000 manufacturing jobs were killed in the last month. The job report also included that 773,000 native-born Americans have lost employment over the last year, while 1 million foreign-born workers have gained employment. And that is the key here. Kamala Harris has allowed an invasion of our border, and she is not only is it contributing to massive crime wave across the country and in the crumbling of our public in Democrat-run cities, these illegal immigrants are directly contributing to the job losses of hardworking Americans, and they are undercutting the wages of working people.
Yeah, it's extraordinary how Kamala continues to say that she is going to help the middle class, yet she's put forward no program to help the struggling middle class. President Donald Trump understood that the key to economic growth was threefold. One, we had to be energy independent. It is the absolute cornerstone to a vibrant economy. But the Harris-Biden administration shut down permits for exploration of and drilling of both oil and gas. Now, too late, they've turned them back on, but it's a little late. Secondarily, his tax cuts, which the Democrats continue to say are only for billionaires, but which in fact were across the board and brought the greatest tax relief for those in the middle brackets, were the second key to economic resurgence. And then, of course, thirdly, his historic cutting of regulation. I remember so well when Barack Obama, taunting President Trump on the campaign trail in 2016, said, "What are you going to do? Just wave a magic wand and bring those manufacturing jobs back?" Well, President Donald Trump brought 635,000 good-paying, full-time manufacturing jobs back to our economy. Yes, that combination works. Energy independence, tax reduction, along with regulation reduction.
That's right. And let me just add one thing, Roger, because it's very important your audience understands. President Trump has announced in his second term he's going to appoint a manufacturing ambassador who is going to travel around the world in recruitment of foreign companies to bring their jobs and their production to the United States of America. And he also has promised to lower the corporate tax rate to 15% to incentivize that job growth here at home. So he has real plans to incentivize job growth here. Kamala's plan to hike the business tax rate to 28% higher than communist China is going to send more jobs overseas.
Really intriguing, because I'm a libertarian, is his floating the idea of doing away with the income tax entirely. We didn't have an income tax until it was first proposed in 1913. I think it was ratified in 1917. But the president has correctly pointed out that we're bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs during his presidency, and can continue to do so when he levels the playing field with our trading partners, who, let's face it, have been ripping us off until he became president and he began to address that imbalance. This is really a provocative idea for more libertarian voters, but I think it's a provocative idea for all voters. Is the president serious about this?
Serious about the manufacturing idea, Roger?
Well, serious about the possibility of replacing the income tax with tariff revenue.
Oh. Hey, look, it's an idea that he has certainly floated. I won't get ahead of him on any announcements, but you see the other tax pledges and promises that he has announced. No tax on tips for our hardworking service workers, particularly in the hospitality industry in states like Nevada, where that's their number one source of revenue. He's also pledged to end taxes on Social Security for our hardworking seniors, who many of whom are living on a fixed income and actually have to find a job out of retirement because they can't keep up with the pace of inflation in Kamala's America. They deserve that hard-earned money going back into their pockets. He has also pledged to end taxes on overtime for workers as well. So these are all bold, ambitious plans. We're going to balance out the spending by cutting the waste in our federal bureaucracy, which will be headed up by Elon Musk. But I mean, in terms of the income tax, look, it's a good idea. Many people have talked about it, and perhaps it will become a reality in a second Trump administration. But I'll leave it to President Trump to make that decision.
Yeah, I think he has enormous courage just to float the idea. It should certainly be explored. I'm no economist, but if the numbers pencil out, he's one of the few people who would have the political courage to do it. All right, that's Caroline Levitt. I know you have a very busy day today. I'm very grateful for your time on this beautiful Sunday. I want to thank you again for joining the Roger Stone Show, and travel safe, my friend. I think you are cruising towards victory.
I think so too, Roger. Hopefully we'll see you Tuesday night. Thank you.
God bless you.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
You know, with the federal government hurtling towards a digital currency system, that's one in which your paper money would be worthless. They would give you a plastic credit card. You wouldn't even control your own money. And then you combine that with the wild spending in Washington. Well, there's never been a better time to protect your retirement, to protect your nest egg, to protect your future by diversifying your holdings to include precious metals like gold and silver. The people I trust are the folks at Colonial Metals Group, and I've looked at them all. I urge you to go to freegoldguide.com, freegoldguide.com, and they can answer all your questions. They can look at your particular retirement plan and advise you the best way to protect yourself with precious metals. Again, that's freegoldguide.com. You'll be glad you visited it.
This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
All right, we're back. This is the Roger Stone Show, and joining us now is Brock Gillespie. Brock Gillespie played professional basketball for 11 seasons in the NBA and in 14 countries abroad. He began at Rice University playing college basketball, leading them to the best years in that school's history. He was chosen as a mentor for NBA Players Association throughout his career, served later as a top advisor to U.S. Congressman Pete Olson of Texas. Since 2017, Brock Gillespie has operated the largest basketball enterprise in China, comprised of training academies and events. And in this endeavor, he has hosted many NBA legends in that country, as well as sports titans from all over the world. He is an old China hand who's lived in Beijing and actually directly negotiated with President Xi himself and his team on a regular basis, and he joins us now on the Roger Stone Show. Brock, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Roger.
So, Brock, what do you think is the current state of U.S.-China relations?
I think right now it's one of uncertainty because there's been, as you know, the current regime has showed nothing but weakness, and the Chinese play on that. I think that Donald Trump, in his unpredictable ways, was somebody that the Chinese respected and feared, but actually enjoyed working with because of his business background. I do think that this election right now, on the horizon, carries a lot of consequences because the Chinese are watching it, as you know, very thoroughly. And I can tell you that is going to be the number one subject on the geopolitical horizon more than anything else. There's nothing else that even matters. So in that regard, I would say that it is pretty serious.
Well, some people believe that the Chinese want a hot war with the United States. Others believe that, well, they have so infiltrated all of our institutions. After all, they own some of the most famous brand name companies in the United States. They have donated very, very heavily to academia. Many colleges spent a lot of money at the University of Pennsylvania that flowed through to Joe Biden, as the House Republicans now have established. Some people believe that their infiltration into our country, where they have their own police stations here throughout the country, in most major cities, where they surveil and monitor their own these nationalists who are in the country. There are those who say that, well, they could take this country over from the inside without firing a shot. Others believe that they actually intend a hot war. I think they base that on the fact that there's a disproportionate number of military-age Chinese coming across our southern border. Many of them we have established were bearing sophisticated weaponry. How do you see this?
So it's my understanding from my time having been there behind the red wall, having the unique vantage point that I had, I do not believe that they want a hot war. The reason being, as a culture, they're not confrontational. They're usually risk averse. They operate within the Sun Tzu motto of only fight a war you can win, fight a war without ever firing a weapon, which is what you've seen in the past, recently, how they operate with proxy wars, right? Everything from the pandemic to stealing IP to infiltrating our universities, as you said. I do believe they have more to lose than we do in that regard. There's a number of measures that we hold over them with leverage as far as trade, commerce, the fact that we have the world on our side for the most part, and the fact that, we're World War champions back to back. And they're a little bit apprehensive to want. I mean, again, I tell people all the time, like, this isn't going to be the Revolutionary War where, we line up and we play our drums and we fire our muskets at one another. I mean, like you said, they've infiltrated us at the highest level internally. Now, they're exposed because a lot of their top officials have their family members here in the United States, attending our schools, in our systems. We don't have that, right? So we're not exposed over there. So it is my belief and thinking that I do not believe they want a hot war at this point in time. So they will more likely fight proxy wars or through back channel negotiations and means of that way.
I was always impressed that the sanctions that President Trump put on Iran were so harsh that even the Chinese would not buy oil from their close ally, some might say their patron state. China would not buy from Iran, which rendered them virtually bankrupt until the Biden administration unfroze $190+ billion in assets. I think that's what you refer to when you talk about the kind of leverage we have on them. The amazing thing is that I think Donald Trump's unpredictability is what has kept them from moving on Taiwan. I mean, they saw the weakness of the Biden administration in Afghanistan. They saw the weakness of the Biden administration on their policy towards Iran. I would think that the Chinese would find that provocative. But Donald Trump, as you know, is a different kind of cat. And I think they fear him. What do you think?
Correct. And as Machiavelli once stated, that fear is stronger than love. And in the case of Donald Trump, who you know I've supported since the early days of 2015, he is somewhat of an enigma to them. Now, the Chinese people, very different from the CCP leadership, actually love the fact that Trump is starting to hold their government accountable. Now, what you talk about Iran on the global stage is very interesting. You're right. The Chinese respect America in a way that I think a lot of times our media, our powers that be, don't necessarily understand how to articulate. They see us as a partner, a titan in the global domination in trade, and they would rather work with us than Muslim counterparts in Iran, who they actually see as beneath them. So dealing with Donald Trump as an equal is something that they actually see legitimizing them and that they welcome. Now, I will tell you this, there's been this kind of incorrect, fictional, conventional wisdom over the years since your old friend Richard Nixon opened up China to the world in 1972, and he's still revered there, by the way. There's been this conventional wisdom by these neocon bureaucrats with their classroom education and understanding of China that China would come to the table and welcome to be westernized, and they would be appreciative of playing the game, and they will fall in line with this, that, and the other. And we feel that our greatest asset to them would be Wall Street or Silicon Valley or academia, when in reality, and this is why this is important for if this show is being listened to by voters in swing states, listen very carefully, because you have a great responsibility, because it's to my understanding, and I've been face to face and heard this with my own ears, the Chinese leadership at the highest level is targeting the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. I have a very thorough understanding of that area, more so than academia, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. They can't feed their people. So they need our agriculture. They rely on our Midwestern states and our agricultural exports. They rely on our industrial industries as far as factories and all of the industries that shine bright throughout the Blue Wall area. And so that doesn't get enough attention. But in China, they're very aware of it. So in that regard, I think you're right. You point out and illustrate some good points. But the Chinese definitely have taken advantage of us over the years. And so, but we definitely have some cards we can play, and I think Donald Trump is the one that knows how to play those cards in the poker game the best.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank my friend Brock Gillespie, an old China hand and a hell of a basketball player, for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. Brock, thank you, and God bless you.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network. My guest now, Rod Blagojevich, who I saw the other night in an incredible interview with Tucker Carlson, was the former governor of Illinois, the first Democrat elected to that office in 26 years. Prior to that, he served in the U.S. Congress. He was also known as federal prisoner number 40892-424 after being wrongly convicted of public corruption on charges having to do with the U.S. Senate seat vacated on Barack Obama. In many ways, Rod Blagojevich was the poster child for a politicized and weaponized judiciary system, because I've read all about his case, and I can tell you Rod Blagojevich did nothing wrong. It is a pleasure and an honor to have us joined by this great American. Rod, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for having me, and thanks for your kind words.
Well, I know why they had to bust you, my friend. I think you would have been president. I can honestly say in the 45 years I've been in American politics, I have never seen, with the possible exception of Ronald Reagan himself, a better political communicator, a more natural political leader than you. I mean, I've been in a downtown Chicago restaurant with you, and I've seen the way the people love you. All people love you. And I think most folks in Illinois and in the country realize that you got a bum deal. Let's go through that real quickly because we have much better things to talk about. But in essence, I think you were set up because you refused the orders of Barack Obama.
Yes, I think that's part of it. I do, and I think that there were other factors as well. It was really, I think, a product of the corruption of the Department of Justice with the new politics of weaponized prosecutors, criminalize things that are legal, necessary, and routine in politics, injecting themselves into the political process and doing to me, a Democrat governor at the AAA level, what they successfully were able to do with a rigged court system after 2 trials. And then they got emboldened and went after Donald Trump this way, the other party. But that's that uniparty in Washington and in other places and in the Department of Justice that is destroying the rule of law, the Constitution, and stealing freedom from people like me who wouldn't give in. But they're really a threat to all of us and our freedoms. Obama started the whole thing. He sent an emissary to me on election night to talk about a political deal because he had a candidate he wanted me to appoint as senator. We began talking about that. They criminalized it against me. It was never corrupt. There was nothing about, I want $10 million in a Swiss bank account. It was, what kind of political deal we can make. Eventually, the appellate court ruled that we were right and they were wrong after I sat in prison for nearly 5 years. They reversed those charges because they were never crimes. But Obama, I think, made a deal with them, and they basically went to him and they basically said, keep us in here as U.S. attorneys, because those were Bush-appointed U.S. attorneys. And we'll leave you alone as long as you don't get involved and do anything to lift a finger to help him. And the moment they were able to secure their convictions at a second trial, all those prosecutors left, got big jobs in big law firms making millions of dollars, and Obama would do nothing to help me. And the great irony, Roger, is that Donald Trump, who didn't know me that well other than a brief stint that I had on Celebrity Apprentice, saw the wrong in it all. And then when he had an opportunity to do what he could, because there were political difficulties he had to actually help a Democrat governor, he did it. And it's just a tale of 2 presidents, really. Obama cold, calculating, sort of indifferent to what's right and wrong, very selfish. And Trump, actually a guy with a kind heart who sees wrong things and actually has the courage, the testicular virility to do something. And in my case, Roger, it's among the reasons why I'm always going to be grateful to President Trump. He gained nothing by helping a Democrat governor. He just saw something that was wrong and ended it. And the best gift my kids have ever gotten, my little girls were little when I went away to prison, and 8 years later they were grown when I came home. The best gift my daughters have ever gotten in their lives and will ever get in their lives was the gift Donald Trump gave them when he brought their father home and gave them their father back.
Well, you were the first governor in the United States to endorse Barack Obama for president. So let no good deed go unpunished.
Right.
You got to remember, I remember everything.
2000. Go ahead, Roger. What?
I remember everything.
No, of course you do. Yes, and you did nothing wrong either. But I had 2,896 days sitting in prison, reminding myself of that. I was the first Democratic governor in America to endorse Obama. I knew him since 1995. We came up together in Chicago politics, and he was all right, but he's I didn't really know him to be the guy that he really turned out to be. And he had great idea. There was hope that when he was elected first black president, that he would usher in a new era in American politics and bring our country together and unite us under what our country's supposed to be, and that is a country of meritocracy, where anybody, white or black, can chase their dreams and get ahead and live the American dream. But what he did was he quickly reverted to what really is his instinct anyway, just to be a cold, calculating, professional politician. And he saw for political reasons he would inflame the black community, divide our country, rather than bring it together, because the only way that they can get black voters to come out in big numbers and provide 90 to 95% of the vote to the Democratic candidate is to point fingers at others, in particular, the white community, and divide our country, because they have done nothing to lift up black people, because their policies have failed, and they're really basically fake. And what did Lyndon Johnson say when they basically provided some of those Great Society programs? We'll get the end vote for 200 years. That's how they see it. They're practical politicians. They're cynical, and they don't really care about lifting black people up. In fact, I would argue black people would be in a much stronger position today in America and really embrace and have a chance to live the American dream had there been other people in charge over those last, 40 years or so since Johnson did what he did.
People don't realize what a strong governor you were. You created historic access to affordable health care for the children of Illinois, free mammograms and pap smears for tens of thousands of women who had no health insurance, established free public transportation for every senior citizen, and you fought taxes during your entire time as governor. You sound to me like you did a great job. I don't think you get the credit you deserve for being not just a good governor, but a great governor. I got to ask you, though, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson recently said that the surging crime violence in the city of Chicago is all Richard Nixon's fault. Can you illuminate this for us?
Well, look, that's another thing that these politicians do when they can't solve problems or don't have the courage to do the hard things necessary to solve problems. In this particular case, the crime problem in Chicago is the gangbangers in the poor neighborhoods, disproportionately, that are black, but they're also Latino, and they're also in some of the other areas too, but largely in the black neighborhoods and the Latino neighborhoods. The gangbangers are running wild because the Democrats here in Illinois, Pritzker, our governor, before Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, now Brandon Johnson, have abandoned the police. They've become hostile to the police and the jobs of the police. And the community, ironically, that gets hurt the most by that are the poor black neighborhoods where crime is rampant because the gangbangers control the neighborhoods. They control the streets. And they control the streets because they know the police are handcuffed. Now, I spent 8 years in prison with criminals, gangbangers. I'm the only governor in American history to put in a higher security prison. I'm writing a book about it. I was a governor that was in prison with Crips and Bloods and gangster disciples and Sinaloa cartel drug dealers. There were murderers in the prison I was in for my first 3 years. So I got to know these guys. And what I know as a fact is that the moment the police aren't around, these guys get active. And when they know the police are on the run, they get really active because this is what they do for a living. This is their livelihood. And in Chicago, the gangs are controlling neighborhoods and they control streets. And the police are handcuffed and they're afraid to do anything lest someone make a mistake. And all of a sudden, they're sent to prison for 1,000 years. We need more police officers because gangbangers outnumber police something like 75-1. And this guy won't do it. He's going to raise property taxes now to keep funding schools that are failing because they're controlled by the teachers' unions who resist any kind of change. And again, here it is. The black community mostly is the community that suffers the most because of these policies. This mayor is seems like a nice enough guy, but he's in over his head. He's controlled by certain unions, and his only answer to his inability to solve problems is that he's a black man and he's being treated unfairly. I mean, this guy literally talks like that. And I think the American people and the black community too are getting sick and tired of these politicians, white or black, who refuse to solve problems or do the hard things to solve the problems, and in some respects don't want to solve the problems. Roger.
If you're just tuning in, folks, this is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Governor Rod Blagojevich, a Democrat of Illinois. Don't touch that dial because we're going to be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
I went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with the Roger Stone Show. Our guest, Governor Rod Blagojevich, former Democrat governor of Illinois, now a proud supporter of President Donald Trump. Governor, I think that there's a political realignment going on in America. I see Republicans like Dick Cheney, who candidly lied this country into war. We went to war based on his assurances that Saddam Hussein and those in Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. He pressured Colin Powell, then the National Security Advisor, into telling the UN that Iraq had acquired yellow cake or uranium for the production of nuclear weapons. Turned out to be false. And the worst and most egregious lie of all, that Iraq played some role in the attack on America on 9/11, launched us into a war in which tens of thousands of Americans lost their lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis lost their lives. Every Democrat, every liberal I knew thought that Dick Cheney was Darth Vader, the most evil man in the history of the world. Now suddenly they embrace him because he's for Kamala Harris. Members of the McCain family now supporting Kamala Harris. Adam Kinzinger, former congressman, Republican congressman, supporting Kamala Harris. Liz Cheney, who I submit to you suborned perjury, certainly in my case, in the case of General Flynn, in the January 6th committee hearings, supporting Kamala Harris. I think the Harris people see this as bipartisan support, which I think is an outdated measure of our politics. Meanwhile, you have Democrats like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and, well, Governor Rod Blagojevich supporting Donald Trump. What's going on here?
It is. It's a historic political realignment, and it didn't just start this year. I would trace the beginnings of it back to even 1992 with Ross Perot. Donald Trump has taken it to a whole new level, his historic election in 2016. But these dynamics have been swirling around for a few decades now, and I think they've hit pretty much critical mass. I think the American people, are recognizing that the two political parties, as they've been composed, as they've been put together over the past couple of generations, are basically one party, and they're basically the Washington, D.C. establishment party. You talk about the Cheneys, and you talk about this new Democrat Party, how they're supporting Kamala Harris. I mean, these are the people who are, the war hawks of America today. When I was growing up, it was Robert Kennedy's father who took a different position on Vietnam than Johnson, and took a different position than President Nixon did. But he led what was called the peace movement. And so it's a very different party today, the Democrat Party. And the Republican Party is very different. Trump has changed it. And what's happening is working class Democrats like me, like my background, like my voters, black voters increasingly, because Trump is reaching out to them. That's not going to happen overnight. They're getting a lot of flack and a lot of resistance from the establishment Democrats, but they're moving in this direction. Latino voters, I predict Trump is going to win a majority of the Latino vote in this election because they want a chance to chase the American dream, live the American dream because they love America, and they appreciate the fact that Trump is actually talking to working people. And the Democrat Party used to be that party, but for, the last couple of administrations, for sure, Obama started it probably. And there was some of this was beginning with Clinton. Actually, Obama took it to a next level. And Biden, they've become, the party of Hollywood and Silicon Valley and corporate America with this strange coalition with these crazy socialists. But at bottom, nobody really cares about everyday Americans. They want to impose their values and their views and impose upon us. Tucker Carlson says this the best. Things that they tell us are true that we know aren't true. They're elitist snobs, and that's why the Cheneys and the Bush family and Kinzinger and those kind of corporate country club Republicans have joined this Democrat Party.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank our guest, Governor Rod Blagojevich. And Rod, I want to invite you back when your book is done, right here on the Roger Stone Show. We want to preview that and look forward to that. And again, I look forward to seeing you on election night. God bless you, my friend, and thank you for being on the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks, Roger. God bless you.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Our guest now is Angelique Fawcett. She is the CEO of Archangel Films in L.A., but more importantly, she is the founder of Elderly Lives Matter USA, and she splits her time between being a filmmaker, producer, director, and being a nationwide elder rights activist. She deals with an extraordinary problem that many Americans may be unaware of, but there are approximately 1.3 million adult conservatorships and guardianships in the United States, and an estimated $50 billion in assets under conservatorship and guardianship arrangements mandated by the courts. 85% of these Americans are over 65 years old, and a great many of them are in abusive or restrictive conservatorships or guardianships in which they die without their human, civil, or constitutional rights being observed. This is a horrific problem, and we are proud to have Angelique with us today to lay this out. Now, many Americans familiar with the situation surrounding Britney Spears. I remember reading extensively about the conservatorship of Mickey Rooney, a classic and famous American actor, Casey Kasem, who was once a top 40 DJ, the late Glenn Campbell. But this problem is more widespread than people know. Angelique, lay it out for us, if you will.
Okay, thank you so much, Roger, and it's an honor to be on your show. Thank you for caring about this topic and sharing it with your audience. yes, I am a nationwide elder rights activist. And the very sad thing about this particular issue in America is that it's a very hidden secret. And most people don't find out about it until it actually happens to them or it happens to someone that they care about. Usually, amongst our activist group, we have a very large movement across the nation, and we're not underground. We are speaking publicly and handling our business the best that we can. But usually people come to us when this happens, or if we tell them about it, they don't believe it happens, like I said, until it happens to them. So I got into this movement not because I wanted to, and I don't believe that any of the activists across the nation become an activist because they want to. It's because you see an injustice that you can't unsee. So my second mom, Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on original Star Trek, she was like a second mother to me. She suffered in an egregiously, physically, publicly abusive conservatorship. She had told me many years prior, please make sure that, no one ever puts me in a rest home again, because that's what happened to her. And she said, I don't care if it's my son. I don't care if it's anyone else. Please have my back. So being a woman of my word, I had her back. In 2018, she was put into conservatorship. And that's when I began my journey with her and standing up for human civil rights and constitutional rights in court. And in fact, Carrie Kasem is actually the one that came to assist me. She's a good friend of mine, but an incredible fellow activist. She went to court. I gained visitation rights. I was acknowledged by the court. But subsequently, the judge denied all the evidence of physical abuse, financial abuse, refused to see anything, and Nichelle was sent to her death. And basically, she passed away on July 30th, 2022. And because of what I saw her go through and the pain it is when you lose a second mom or your own mom, obviously your blood is even more. It's so painful, you can't unsee it. And then throughout my journey, I met so many other people who have gone through this. You mentioned Mickey Rooney. Kelly Rooney is on the board of Kasem Cares along with all of us. So is Travis and Trudy Campbell. We're on the board of Kasem Cares. I created Elderly Lives Matter USA to bring all of these groups together. So I have people in various areas that are experiencing this.
Folks, you can find out more by going to elderlylivesmatterusa.org. What Angelique tells us today is so incredibly compelling. I've studied everything you sent me. The real problem seems to be here that probate judges are ignoring and not acknowledging pertinent evidence of abuse towards these senior citizens, and this is happening across the country. Yes,
Across the country. I literally work with people across the country every day. Within, a certain group of people I have Mary Bush, whose mom was Genevieve Bush. Her mother was penetrated. I'll say that as best so I can say. She was penetrated by her own son. This is on a court document while she was in a conservatorship. She ended up passing away. I have Stuart Hansey and Roger Hilligus from Nevada. Roger Hilligus' mother passed away. She was in an abusive guardianship in in Nevada, and they got her out of it, and then they were accused of kidnapping his own mom. I have Sue Reeves and Skylar Davis, who are in New Jersey. Skylar Davis is one of the youngest, I'd say, advocates in the nation, standing up for his right to see his father. There's people across the country. So imagine this. If you are an elderly person or you are approaching that age, and I wanted people to know how you can fall into it, right? So say you're a little bit sick. You go to the hospital because you feel really just a little bit sick enough to go to the hospital. And they give you what's called a mini mental. A mini mental is where they come in and they ask you a lot of regular seeming questions. What's your name? What's the date? Who's the president of the United States? What country do you live in? How is it at home? Do you live alone? Do you have kids? Are you married? Questions that really don't pertain to your health, but they mix them in. That's called a mini-mental. Next thing you know, you have been in the presence of a doctor that may not be so ethical. Next thing you know, your information is given to that social worker. The social worker then gives it to a conservator or guardian, depending upon your state. And then next thing you know, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month from that time, you have a conservator or guardian at your front door saying, you must come with us. The court has ordered you to be in a conservatorship or guardianship. It's totally legal. It's illegal in our constitutional and human and civil rights mind. It's illegal. But according to the probate court, it's a legal thing to do. If you don't go with that conservator or guardian, then you are taken to jail. Now, if you're taken to jail, either way you do it, your whole life now belongs to someone else. So the conservator or guardian has access to all of your money now, all of your investments, your home, your cars, everything. They can take everything you have. The worst thing is they take your person. They end up taking your life. But they have now control over you. Your family can't find you. And then when they do find you, they have no control. Suddenly you're in a rest home or a hospital, and that's it. And then your whole life is stuck in probate court. And the judges and attorneys work against you. In many cases, people are not allowed to go to court and stand up for any prior arrangements they made before they got into a conservatorship or guardian. Their wills and trusts mean nothing in probate court. And so that's why when you mention, that there's billions of assets under conservatorships and guardianships, there really are. So everything you worked hard for, you're working hard right now. I'm working, people work. Everything that you worked hard for is now someone else's. It doesn't attribute to you getting old and you want to live your life a certain way, or you even want to give it to your kids. It's now someone else's. And that's a huge problem for us in America. And I do have most people die in conservatorship, but there's a few people who are still around and they're trying to fight for their rights as well. And we're all trying to help them.
Again, folks, you can learn more by going to elderlylivesmatterusa.org, a nonprofit organization that is fighting for legal reform. It is shocking to me that probate judges are actually denying our senior citizens their right to testify in court upon their own behalf, where they can state their own end-of-life desires, their prior attempts to plan their future in the manner of wills, trusts, even videos that they have left, all ignored or denied by the court across the country. Elderly are not allowed to report the psychological, physical, or financial abuses that are being inflicted upon them by the conservatives, their guardians, their caretakers. This can happen to your own family members, folks. That's why I wanted to have Angelique with us today. Angelique has actually gotten a change in California state law in this area. We're going to talk about that when we come back, so don't touch that dial. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show. It is our privilege to have Angelique Fawcett of Elderly Lives Matter USA with us. We'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show. This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back, folks. Our guest, Angelique Fawcett. She's not only the CEO of Archangel Films in L.A., but more importantly for today's discussion, she's the founder of Elderly Lives Matter USA, where she is fighting for the rights of our elder Americans who are being abused in the current system of abusive conservatorship and guardianship cases. It is shocking how little the American people know about this, but Angelique, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you boil this all down, it seems to be all about the money, isn't it?
Yeah, it is all about the money. And mostly, most of us, we just want a good life. We just want to live our life. We want to do what we do, enjoy what we do, and live our life. And the money that we create throughout our life, we want to use that for our retirement or for whatever you want to do at the end of your life. If you don't want to retire, like Nichelle Nichols never wanted to retire, but the world was told she was, right? But it's all about the money. And what ends up happening is the worst thing is that usually people end up dying in these conservatorships and guardianships because they don't care about the person. They just care about liquidating that individual, the elderly individual's asset.
Seems to be a pattern here where the elderly fall into a situation in which they are isolated, they're over-medicated, their assets are then stolen, there's nothing they can do to retaliate. Ultimately, they pass and they're cremated. It's horrific. Yes, that's the elder abuse formula. Isolate, over-medicate, steal the estate, retaliate, and cremate. And I'll be really quick with that. Isolation is pretty simple. Unfortunately, they get the person into a conservatorship or guardianship, and they isolate them from anyone, family, friends, whomever. But usually that elderly person is by themselves in their home with a very abusive caretaker. It's already abuse if the person is isolated, right? Then over-medicating them, basically giving them medication that they don't need. Older people tend to have medication, but giving them medication they don't need to make them spacey or not aware, drugged up. Then they steal the estate. They start working on the estate. They start liquidating the property. There's usually land across the country, the people I speak to. There's always seems to be land that's involved. People want to get the land or the home. Then they retaliate against the elderly person if they put up any fight, meaning they physically beat them up, abuse them, and they can do whatever they want to behind closed doors, right? No one knows because they're isolated. And there's family out there fighting for them. So they retaliate against those family members who are fighting against what's going on with their mother or father. So they it's like a chasm, they say, oh, well, this person, this child is wrong for standing up for their mother and father. They're evil. And then they basically defame, slander, and libel the person who is fighting so they will then stop fighting for their mother and father and focus on themselves. And most of these people, I know the movement that I'm in, they stand up for their mother and father. They don't care about what you're saying to them. Yes, it hurts them, it harms them, but they stand up for their mother and father to the death. I've seen it. And then, unfortunately, the saddest part, the people really need to worry about. You need to really think about this. Most of these people get cremated immediately after they pass away. They're not usually buried. They're usually cremated to hide the evidence of any physical abuse. And that's really scary. So basically, someone comes into that person's home, into their life, and they steal everything, and then they get rid of the evidence, and they're never in trouble for it. There are solutions to all of this, though. Well, you've passed a bill into law with the support of many of your activist colleagues in California. Tell us about that.
Yes, that bill is called the Kasem-Nichols-Rooney Law, SB 1106. Senator Susan Rubio helped us with that. Carrie Kasem met Senator Susan Rubio, and it was signed into the law. The governor signed it into law last month, and it is a elder visitation law, so that people are able to more easily visit the elderly in the state of California. So now, if the judges will actually follow the law that they're supposed to be implementing, then people are able to see their elderly. And many people usually don't know that they can't see their elderly when they're put into a conservatorship or guardianship. They just think, that's my mom, of course I can see her. That's my dad, of course I can see him. But no, this visitation law is put in place so that you will be protected, and the elderly person will especially be protected so they can see their kids and family members. And I just like to mention, too, there are some people, there's Elderly Lives Matter USA, but there's also Kasem Cares. Kasem Cares is mentioned. Helps Us. There's also Judicialpedia that was created by Janice Grenadier. There's Court Victim by Bob Gettinger. These are websites that people can go to see that there's other instances of this abuse, and they can get help, right? So there's people across the nation. So that's in California, but I'd like to mention too that Carrie Kasem has created a visitation laws in several states across the nation. And we're just trying to get the judges to actually follow these laws.
In your extensive experience in this area, have you come across an honest probate judge?
No. And that's saying a lot, because years ago, I'm in my 50s now, but years ago in my 20s, I worked 8 years with law enforcement. I was an investigator and undercover, right? So, but I worked for a department store. That's what I did when I was young. That was my thing. I didn't party. I just liked to do what I did, and that's what I did. And I worked for 8 years with law enforcement, and every criminal judge I met actually seemed pretty ethical. They listened to the evidence. If it was a jury trial, there's a jury. There's one really important thing for people to realize. In probate court, there is no jury. So if the judge is making a decision by themselves, they can be swayed in any which way. And we all know, as we've seen in media, that everything doesn't go right in court, does it? Especially if there's no jury. And even if there's a jury, sometimes it's crazy. But I have not come in contact or even heard of a probate judge that is actually assisting people in a proper manner. No.
So what is the national solution? How do we fix this?
We would love to abolish conservatorships and guardianships and enter something, if we must, that's less restrictive of the elderly. People need to stop thinking that, the elderly don't matter because they're old and, they're done for anyway. They have dementia. They have Alzheimer's. They're sick. That's not true. You're human. We're all human beings, right? Are we not? We are, right? So it would be wonderful to abolish.
All right. I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank our guest, Angelique Fawcett, and urge folks to go to the website, elderlylivesmatterusa.org, because, folks, this is a fight you need to get in. Angelique, thank you so much for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, your genial host here at The Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC Radio, the most powerful, influential, and entertaining AM radio station in the United States. You can always find us at 770 on the AM dial if you live in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I grew up. But if you're out of town, you can always find us at WABCRadio.com, where we are live streaming on 163 nations worldwide. So there's no excuse for missing what we do here every Sunday. We're here every Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and we talk politics, news, style, food, and much, much more. Joining us later today on the show is the single smartest guy I know in American politics. He happens to be a Democrat. That would be legendary Democrat strategist Hank Scheinkoff. You're not going to want to miss that. Last Sunday, I spoke to you just before going to President Donald Trump's incredible rally at Madison Square Garden. A lot of controversies come out of that rally when I guess what you'd call a roast comedian made a tasteless comment about Puerto Rico. That was a flap for about 2 days until Joe Biden went out and called every supporter of Donald Trump garbage. That kind of subsumed the political narrative. But the truth is, following the devastation of Hurricane Maria, which struck Puerto Rico in 2019, it was the Trump administration that swung into action. Its response was swift, historic, and unrelenting, continuing literally until days before President Trump left the White House in January of 2021. Under Trump's leadership, thousands of federal employees were deployed to the island to assist with recovery efforts, which included the longest sustained air mission of food and water delivery and the largest Sea Brigade operation to that point in FEMA's entire history. In the immediate aftermath of that disaster, actually, President Trump authorized billions of dollars for Puerto Rico's rebuilding and recovery. The specifics include $9.6 billion to repair and rebuild Puerto Rico's electrical grid, another $2 billion to Puerto Rico's Department of Education for restoration of school buildings and facilities, 100% funding of Puerto Rico's emergency work cost share for nearly a year after the storm, the third longest ever granted by any president, and in all more than $40 billion in aid and assistance from the Trump administration directly to the people of Puerto Rico. Predictably, of course, the fake news media ignored all of these facts and has since then shamelessly and falsely portrayed the president as ineffective and uncaring about Puerto Rico. In fact, much of that federal aid was made available and has yet to be utilized due to the Biden administration's failure to hold the Financial Oversight Board and Puerto Rico's current government accountable to actually utilize a lot of those funds. In fact, to make things worse, 8 years after Congress afforded the country bankruptcy relief, as it had accumulated debts totaling more than $70 billion, Puerto Rico's power utility, PREPA, remains in bankruptcy while spending hundreds of millions of dollars on law firms and consultants who are financially incentivized to perpetuate the status quo. So the $9.6 billion authorized by President Trump to rebuild the electrical grid sits there largely unspent, subject to more than 3 million Americans who reside there to frequent blackouts and outages. Vice President Harris unveiled a plan for Puerto Rico last week. Unfortunately, it contains more of the same vapid claims and promises centered around clean energy, which the Biden-Harris administration has already squandered billions of dollars on with virtually nothing to show for it. In fact, the Harris plan does nothing to address the key obstacles to Puerto Rico's growth, or does nothing to end their current bankruptcy, which would catalyze outside investment and begin the reconstruction of a 21st century business-sustaining energy infrastructure for Puerto Rico. Instead, they're depending on this green hype, but it's not doing the job. So in other words, the money that Donald Trump appropriated sits in the bank. It's the sad truth. This, of course, got subsumed very quickly by the fact that President Joe Biden actually referred to President Trump's supporters, I guess that would include me, as garbage. And incredibly, according to the Associated Press, they actually altered the transcript, which is the official record that is sent to the National Archives, to make it appear that that was not the case. This is just a throwback to when Hillary Clinton called us deplorables, or when the current Department of Justice decided that Catholics who wanted to go to the Latin Mass, or parents who wanted to attend a school board meeting to express concern about the curriculum being taught to their children, were categorized as domestic terrorists. The Attorney General of the United States denied that, but then documents surfaced that proved it was absolutely true. So we have an upcoming elections. I eat, sleep, and breathe politics. If you cut my wrist, I'd probably bleed politics. And folks, I can tell you this is going to be an extraordinarily close election. Should not be, in my opinion. I think Donald Trump has run an amazingly disciplined campaign, very much like, unlike his campaigns of 2016 and 2020, which were more freewheeling. But the idea that, as I guess it was Mark Cuban said, that Trump does not surround himself with strong, intelligent women is completely false. If you knew his co-campaign manager, Susie Wiles, for example, or Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. So what will happen? Well, I believe that on Election Day, President Donald Trump will win a majority of the popular vote. I also believe he will win a majority of the Electoral College vote. But I am candidly concerned that the Democrats and their media buddies are working to create a hysteria about President Trump's comments. First of all, repeatedly referring to him as Hitler, referring to his supporters as Nazis. Let's remember it was Congressman Dan Goldman who, prior to the assassination attempt on President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, said that Donald Trump needed to be, and I quote him, eliminated. Then it was the honcho sent in by Barack Obama to head Kamala Harris's train wreck of a campaign, David Plouffe, who said that Trump needed to be terminated. That, of course, all was after Joe Biden said that it was time to put the bullseye on Donald Trump. It is this hateful, overheated rhetoric that has brought us to where we are today. At least 2 assassination attempts against an American president, I believe, caused by this atmosphere of hate. It's unacceptable. Yet they build a narrative that Trump supporters are going to be violent after the election. I have a piece up on Substack right now which argues exactly the opposite. In fact, if you are a supporter of President Trump, or if you're a supporter for Kamala Harris, if there's a dispute about this election, well, then that dispute needs to play out in a court of law. That's how we decide things here in the United States. And in those instances, by the way, you can't just have supposition. If you believe, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that there is actual voter fraud, well, then you need to have actual hard proof of that, not just a theory, not just a claim. But that is the way a democratic republic works. I think all of this hyperbole is an attempt to prepare the people for what I believe is going to be a challenge to the election result. Congressman Jamie Raskin, of whom I am not a fan, kind of laid it out for us when he told us that it didn't really matter if we voted for Donald Trump, that the House Democrats had no intention of certifying his election.
What can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand. as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress. So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in civil war conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job and interpret what the great 14th Amendment means. And I'm glad that Sherilyn's creating her new center.
I think it was on Sunday, October 13th, On with Maria Bartiromo asked President Trump about President Joe Biden's claim that the election day would not be peaceful. The Fox News host first referenced outside agitators. Indeed, there are 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country, people who are actually on the terrorist watch, people who came over our southern border, 13,000 illegal immigrant murderers. That's a fact. And then asking, what about a Trump victory? Joe Biden said he didn't think it's going to be peaceful. Well, we need it to be peaceful. When President Trump was asked about this, he said, I think the bigger problem, bigger than providing a peaceful election day, is the enemy from within. Not even the people that have come here and destroyed our country, but I don't think they're the problem in terms of election day. I think the bigger problem are people from within. We've had some very bad people. He's referring, of course, to the Russian collusion hoax, in which we now know, based on the report by special counsel by John Durham, that there never was any collusion between Russian intelligence, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign. And even in my own case, even though I had to wait until BuzzFeed sued the U.S. Department of Justice to finally get Robert Mueller's fully unredacted final report, even Mueller himself could not sugarcoat the fact that he'd found no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. Yes, the people who did this, the people who pursued our president through not only the Russian collusion hoax, but 2 fraudulent impeachment attempts, and then the unmitigated lawfare against him in a New York courtroom, 2 New York courtrooms, and still who hope to bring him to trial in a federal courtroom. Those are the people the president is speaking of. They are abusing the system. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show right here on 77 WABC Radio. Take a minute now, folks, to go to the App Store and download the 77 WABC app. And don't go away. Don't touch that dial, because we'll be right back.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show. This will be our last Sunday show before the most consequential election in American history. The choice, I think, is very clear, but whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, regardless of who you support, we strongly urge you to vote. Just because you live in a red state or a blue state, don't assume anything, because the national popular vote is just as important as it is the electoral vote, although we select the president based on an electoral vote system that is designed to protect the rights of the people in the small states. But the national popular vote is equally important, at least in sense of the legitimacy of the next president. The New York Times, of course, went totally unhinged when Trump suggested that we had an enemy within, something I have direct experience with, but they suggest that it was Trump who said he would turn the military on Americans because they oppose his candidacy. There is nothing to that. The idea that Trump is going to, as Chris Matthews said, put journalists up against a wall and shoot them. Completely and totally absurd. The Democrats, as we now know, are actually the ones who just last week issued Defense Department Directive 5204.01. This is shocking because the language in this directive is, well, it's chilling. While it bans assassination by the military, it also authorizes lethal force for the first time against Americans. It authorizes the military to provide assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality or any other situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force. Deeper in this document, you also see for the first time that they also include authority to spy on Americans, to surveil us in violation of the Constitution. So, candidly, when people ask me, and they do every day, who's going to win this election, I think Donald Trump is going to win. I think he's running an excellent campaign. I have to admit, I'm tickled to see him riding around in a garbage truck in Wisconsin, identifying with working people. He has completely, I think, changed the trajectory of American politics. He certainly changed the Republican Party in being the party of working people, the party of the middle class. And I've spoken and written extensively about the new governing coalition that I think is coming into place. I think this is akin to the 1932 coalition put together under Franklin Roosevelt. The 1968 coalition begun by Richard Nixon, but which ultimately elected Ronald Reagan. This is a coalition that includes independents and Democrats who are people of common sense. The old Democrat Party of Truman and Kennedy seems to have been replaced by a socialist party, while those who once followed Truman and Kennedy now follow Marx and Lenin. Speaking about this shocking Department of Defense directive, Robert Kennedy said, under this directive, it will become legal for the U.S. military to shoot and kill Americans who engage in political protest because they disagree with the policies of the White House. Kennedy actually excoriated the Harris-Biden camp for their dishonesty and their hypocrisy and tried to blame Donald Trump for supposedly trying to do exactly what they themselves have just authorized. Didn't come from Donald Trump, it came from the Democratic Party. RFK said that's precisely the reason he left the party. Former Congressman Ron Paul, a man that I greatly admire, said that openly, will we see U.S. troops on U.S. soil using lethal force against Americans? The former congressman said it's very, very dangerous. So as these Harris-Biden administration preparations to use the military on Americans are being exposed, it is little wonder that they, along with other Democrat candidates and their media enablers, are accusing Donald Trump of doing exactly what they themselves are doing. And that is the situation. This is the 2024 Democrat playbook to stoke fear in the voters. While that may work with those who Rush Limbaugh once said were the low information voters, I don't think it'll work with most Americans now that we've been lied to by these people for so many years. We're not buying anything they're selling. As we get closer and closer to this election, as the Democrats get more and more panicked at the prospect of losing, sadly, I think we can expect more of this. I wouldn't be surprised to see a reprise of that famous 1964 Daisy ad. You remember that? It was a little girl and a flower, and then they showed a mushroom cloud. The Democrats trying to say that if Barry Goldwater had been elected in 1964, that he would have been a real threat to democracy. And Americans, therefore, must vote in droves while they still can to end this menace that threatens us all. I say it again, violence is never the answer. The other surprising news I saw late last week was when House Speaker Michael Johnson suggested that the Department of Justice was pursuing Mayor Eric Adams because Adams had been a critic of President Biden's migrant crisis. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but that is not the case. Mayor Adams campaigned as a proponent of New York City being a sanctuary city, and his only real complaint against the current administration was that they did not give him the funds to solve the horrific problem they have caused for New York City. Buying into this narrative that Mayor Adams is being prosecuted or persecuted simply because he's out of step on immigration policy is simply not true, Mr. Speaker. If you go read that indictment, and I have, the mayor is charged with taking $10 million in Turkish funds from Turkey, and then using straw donors to feed them into the city's campaign finance system, where he gets a 10-to-1 match. That is not the upgrade of an airline ticket. That's not a free Bloody Mary. It is a serious matter. Now, in all fairness, the mayor and his associates are not guilty until proven guilty in a court of law. And today, those are just indictments. In our system, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. But Mayor Johnson should know a bit more about the situation before he opines on it. I do want to say that I'm really pleased to be part of the 77 WABC family. This is, of course, the radio station I grew up listening to, Cousin Brucey, Harry Harrison. I remember listening to 77 WABC in my 1965 Volkswagen convertible growing up in suburban Connecticut. It is a very proud thing that I'm here as a part of the 77 WABC family. And I enjoy talking politics with you every Sunday from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. I want to remind you again that you can go to the App Store on your cell phone and download the 77 WABC app so you don't miss any of the great programming we have here on the crown jewel of AM radio, 77 WABC. Next week, I will be back with another one of my mother's favorite recipes. But today we had so much politics that I wanted to cover. Well, I couldn't quite fit it all in. I still am in shock that the President of the United States referred to all of us as garbage. My wife went out for Halloween the other day dressed as a garbage bag. I find most Trump supporters taking this in good humor. But nonetheless, that strategy of denigrating the people who support Donald Trump, I think is unwise. When your closing strategy in a presidential campaign is to accuse your opponent of being like Hitler and accuse all of his supporters of being Nazis. Well, I was in Madison Square Garden. I saw a lot of flags for the state of Israel. I saw a lot of yarmulkes. I saw a lot of my Jewish friends. It was nothing like it's being described. It was a diverse, happy crowd that was celebrating the entire America First ethos. Anyway, we have one of the top experts on American politics, Hank Scheinkoff, a Democrat strategist, someone I have immense respect for, coming up on the Roger Stone Show. You're not going to want to miss that. So, folks, whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. And remember, if you're out of town, you can find us at WABCRadio.com. We're live streaming in 163 nations around the globe. I'm Roger Stone, and we'll be right back.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC Radio, the crown jewel of AM radio, literally the most powerful, influential, and entertaining AM radio station in the entire United States. Reminding you, you can listen to us either at 770 on the AM dial, or if you're out of town, you can always listen to us at WABCRadio.com. Joining me now is literally one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to not just U.S., but world politics. Hank Scheinkoff has worked in over 700 political campaigns on 4 continents and in 14 foreign nations. His political clients have included President Bill Clinton, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Leonel Fernandez, former president of the Dominican Republic, and the president of Mexico, Vicente Fox. Let me put it to you this way. I've worked with Hank Scheinkoff, and I've worked against him, and you don't want to work against him. Dr. Scheinkoff, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Well, I'm very grateful for your kind introduction, which is kind of embarrassing, but I'm always happy to be with you, Roger.
Well, Hank, the thing I respect about you is, I come on this show and I criticize Republicans and Democrats. I'm a partisan, sure. I have a sentimental attachment to the party of Eisenhower and Goldwater and Nixon and Reagan and, of course, Trump. But I have plenty of criticism for Republicans like Cheney and McCain and Adam Kinzinger and others. The thing I like about you, Hank, is you always tell it straight. You never color your analysis with your own feelings. And that's a very rare thing. It's very hard to find. So we're honored to have you today. And, of course, the question on the table is what will happen in next Tuesday's election? How do you see this shaping up?
It's a very odd election, but in some ways, in other ways, not, because the American political system is everybody's kind of in the middle, Roger. People think they're on the extremes, but they're really not. They're somewhat confused, but I would bet the following. That the Democrats lose the Senate 52-48 at least, okay? The Republicans have a significant edge. I would bet that in the popular vote that the Democrats take back the House, not by big numbers, but by enough. And I think reproductive rights are going to be issue in a lot of the suburbs, not in New York State necessarily, but other places where congressmen are going to be, that'll just be, and it won't be a significant number because it hasn't been of late, probably hasn't been for a long time. And the presidential campaign will hinge on what occurs in places that the world has never heard of. That the most powerful person in the history of the universe, of the richest nation in the history of the world, and the most powerful military nation in the world that person will be chosen by voters in a place called Montgomery County, Delaware County, in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania. And that is really what it gets down to in my hunch. And I think that it will probably be Harris by a hair on reproductive freedoms is my bet. Or it'll be Trump by a hair because the Jews in those part of the country will vote for Trump on Israel-related issues. That's how close I think this thing is. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it today.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. If you go by the polling, which we both study like, maniacs, because we're junkies at this stuff. Less so the modeling, because I'm never really confident. You never know what goes into the modeling, You have all these famous modelers who are making predictions, but this, I said this earlier in the show, for any Republican or Trump supporter who thinks this is some kind of runaway, some kind of landslide, some kind of, Trump has it in the bag, that's not what I'm seeing. I do think he has run a better campaign than she has. I do think that he has run a more substantive campaign that he has. But like you, I see it being extraordinarily close. If in the end she loses Pennsylvania, but wins Michigan and Minnesota, then folks will say, well, had she taken Governor Josh Shapiro for vice president instead of Tim Walz, she might have won. On the other hand, if she had taken Shapiro, I wonder whether she would have been able to win in Michigan and Minnesota with the very large Muslim American populations, which have traditionally been very active in Democrat Party politics. That one decision here really could be determinative in the way this comes out.
I think that's well said. I don't think that I don't believe the Democrats win Wisconsin. Maybe I'm stupid, but I keep hearing about these and watching these Tammy Baldwin, the anti-Tammy Baldwin campaign. I worked in Wisconsin years ago. Yeah, it's a place where spearfishing upsets people in the North Country, Wisconsin. They want to kill the indigenous American Indians, right? Because they spearfish. I mean, you're talking about a very different kind of a state than people in the West and the East Coast think exists. And the Tammy Baldwin, the campaign against her for being a lesbian and living with her girlfriend in New York and calling her the third senator from New York, has legs in most of that state. So I'm not sure that the Democrats win Wisconsin. Minnesota, not enough there to make it work. I mean, Michigan is the problem. I worked there for many years. The presumption that the elites on the East and West Coast seem to have is that Michigan, the UAW, really controls the vote. That's not true. Most of the people in the UAW are not great wild liberals. They are guys who like their country homes, right, where they're making a buck, right, and they like their shotgun in the back of that truck, and they like the boat attached to it that goes up the Upper Peninsula or wherever they're going to get away as far away from Detroit as they can. And the resentment because of the destruction of Detroit, the destruction of the auto industry is huge. So I wouldn't bet that that's a done deal for Harris. And I may be wrong about that, but for those reasons, although I mean, years back, I did the in-state campaign for the UAW for Gore and Lieberman in 2000, and we won it by a hair, and their values were out of sync with the bulk of the population there. So it can be done, but it doesn't feel right. But, Ohio, forget about it. That's over. Sherrod Brown may be out of work too. But coming back east, it still gets down to that Keystone State, I think. And people are misreading Pennsylvania as well. They see it as a monolith, and they somehow believe Philadelphia overpowers the voting outcomes. Not true. Proportionally, as you know, Roger, more people turn out in western Pennsylvania than the east. Proportionally, that the hatred of Harrisburg and Philadelphia by western Pennsylvanians is significant and unending. And that the only balance that offsets that is what goes on in the Philadelphia suburbs. And Trump's rally, the comments by the comedian about Puerto Ricans may impact the Lehigh Valley, where you have a significant number of new immigrants living there who are powering the gaming industry and other things that are going on, and rebuilding those old industrial cities in the Lehigh Valley. So it is anything can happen. That's what I really believe it's in the east, and maybe I'm wrong. Delco, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Philadelphia suburbs, and Lehigh Valley. And what the turnouts are will be. You can project turnouts and do modeling all day long, but how angry are people, or how motivated are they? People don't motivate to vote, as you know, by love. They motivate oftentimes by just dislike and distrust and a gut feeling that things need to change or something needs to be done. So that's how I see it today.
Yeah, my old friend Arlen Specter, who was the only four-term senator in Pennsylvania history, we used to argue endlessly about the Warren Commission and his single bullet theory, but putting that aside, he summed this up by saying, the people in western Pennsylvania hate the people in eastern Pennsylvania, and the people in eastern Pennsylvania are ambivalent about the people in western Pennsylvania. And I think that sums it up. Some of this data does indicate to me that the economic issues have allowed Trump to make inroads into those collar counties around Philadelphia, Bucks, Montgomery, and so on, where, as you know, those counties, once Republican strongholds, have been trending Democrat in more recent years. This is for sure. The Republicans, including many friends of mine, have poured more resources into the Keystone State than I think any other state. A massive grassroots voter registration and now chasing the Pennsylvania ballots. My good friend Cliff Maloney has been living, on the ground there. Also, Scott Pressler, the great folks at Turning Point USA. This is old-fashioned grassroots, shoe leather, knock on doors politics. You don't see it that much today. As you and I both know, the whole system has become so automated. You used to go to the Republican or Democrat headquarters and you could volunteer by stuffing envelopes and addressing envelopes to voters. Today, of course, all those things are done by computers, just using that as an example. Phone banks, well, they're all automated today. There's no human involvement other than maybe the original recording, and even that's pretty much done by AI. So they've taken the people out of politics in a very strange way. How much stock do you put in these early voting totals, which of course can only be read by party? We don't know how people actually voted, but we do know their party. I think people are so anxious that they tend to look at these numbers, but I'm not sure how much to read into them. How much do you think we should read into them?
I don't think you should read into them very much at all. It's kind of like I've become very cynical about those kinds of stats, and I've become very cynical about polling generally, because as you know, Roger, obsessives like us look at this stuff and we say, wait a second, this doesn't quite fit. And what doesn't fit in my hunch about what's happened the last several cycles, election cycles, is that people are buying their samples. Pollsters are buying samples, which they need, from the same sample houses and talking to the same people and getting the same false positives or false negatives. So I think it becomes more about actual people rather than polls. And you're right. Economic issues are tending in that state probably to assist Donald Trump. Reproductive rights issues are tending, of course, across the country to assist the Democrats. But people are wary, and Donald Trump has run a much better campaign in many ways, more emotional, more evocative. And this has now become not about Kamala Harris so much, but about people's feelings about Donald Trump. And is there enough goodwill that they, or the sense that they need him because of the economics to change the entire discussion? And that may be the case. If that's the case, she loses and he wins. Unquestionably so.
It is an anomaly that, in a strange sense, obviously, a presidential election is about the performance of the party in power. But by forcing the withdrawal of Joe Biden, in a way, she has succeeded in making the race a referendum on Trump. On the other hand, two things surprised me. One, that the party of Truman, the party that founded Israel, will not stand up for Israel. And this delicate balancing act that they seem to be trying to do, giving $190 billion plus to a rogue regime in Iran that turns around and uses that money to finance Hamas and Hezbollah and their terrorist attacks on Israel, as well as restarting their nuclear weapons program. At the same time, we should be standing up for our only democratic ally in the region, Israel, puts them in a very strange position.
Yeah, that's true. Look, we know from previous studies that I think it was Schlesman, Verber, and a whole bunch of other people did a major study some years back on why Americans vote and how they vote. And what they found was that Americans tend not to vote on foreign policy issues. But this is different. This entire cycle is different. And the period of time we're living in is different, probably since the Trump victory of 2016, that the world as we knew it is changing at such a rapid rate. People say it's technology. Nonsense. It's the balance of power and what it means to the greatest nation in the history of the world, this one. And Trump more embodies the protection of that. And I think Americans do know that if Israel loses this war, which is akin to the proxy wars we had people fighting around the world during the Cold War, won by Ronald Reagan and George Bush, by the way, I might add, that if this is a proxy war and should the Israelis lose, the West is doomed, unquestionably so. I think people are beginning to figure it out. And they also, those who serve the military, remember the murder of 250 or so Marines and service people in Beirut in 1983, and they understand who's behind it. In other words, people have more information who don't understand this stuff, have more information about what it actually means and the historical sense of it, and they're not, they're concerned. And, you know, even the Holy New York Times, I think, had a piece last week noting that the Iranians were assisting behind the scenes in the ways that people do this, or at least had the hopes, or certainly were trying to assist Kamala Harris because they know Trump will doom them. And the Democrat and the Russians, whether it's true or not, but again, the Holy New York Times reporting it, are assisting Trump behind the scenes as they can. So we have this world, we have the real forces of the world entering into this campaign in a way that people haven't seen for quite some time. And this is serious and more serious than ever before because the future of the West is at risk. Do people see that? I think they do, Roger. I think they're much more sophisticated than the academics and pollsters would lead us to believe.
So let me put you on the spot here. This is a tough question. We see a breakdown of, I think, party increasingly less important in the way that people vote, but still a major factor. When the dust settles, what percentage of American Jewish voters do you think will vote for Donald Trump?
I think it will be more significant than ever before. But there's a reason for it. I mean, the Jewish community is has a 70%. Those who are not observant have a 70% plus intermarriage and assimilation rate, which are essentially that's a good standard to use. Those who are becoming more observant are becoming more Republican and more conservative in their behavior and voting patterns, and reject a lot of the lifestyle mandates that are being put upon people and the level of discourse. I think you're going to see a percentage. I think it'll double over what it has been in the past, unquestionably so.
So is that 25%? Is that 28%? I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Ronald Reagan did exceptionally well with Jews, as we know, around the country, especially people who are much more conservative. I think it's in the 25 to 30% range. I think that would be an extraordinary event.
That
if
would
that's
be
the case. Then Donald Trump does very, very well in the suburbs of Philadelphia.
That would truly be extraordinary. It seems to be of the major, let's call them building blocks of the Democrat coalition. Jewish voters have been since the 30s have been a mainstay. It interests me the inroads, and this is all quantifiable, the inroads that he clearly has made specifically among Hispanics. The Hispanic numbers are impressive. Many surveys showing them actually over 50% of Hispanic Americans, whereas George W. Bush had the previous high water mark at, I think, 38.9, or maybe it was 39.8. That is surprising. And then I've seen these polls that show that Trump is running more traditionally among black voters, African American voters, around 10, 11, and 12. That's not what I'm seeing. That's not what the Trump internal polling is showing. Right. He seems to have made serious inroads there.
With the breakdown of parties, Roger, which you noted before, it has become more about personalities. And with the Latinos, I don't like that word, but with voters who come from Spanish-speaking, who can trace their roots to Spanish-speaking countries, the argument is it's about values, and it's about family values, and it's about economics. These are very, very, very mercantile, hardworking people for whom family is everything. They're upset by the change in values they see around them, and they're also upset by the fact that they played by the rules, and people are now being brought into the country or allowed into the country who did not. And that's a reasonable set. You can see the reports in newspapers is not stuff we're dreaming up on a daily basis and on television, talking about these very issues with respect to African Americans. The breakdown of parties, it's lasted a long time since the Kennedys that the blacks have voted Democrat, because for many years, as you know, blacks were Republicans in this country. And the change with the Kennedys. And now we've gone ahead 60 years. And that is starting to change somewhat because as the parties break down, then this becomes more about personalities. And Trump's personality as is caused by The Apprentice and other things in his life have become so overwhelming that they blot out the negatives that the Democrats might toss at him about race because they become less believable. In other words, someone you know that well who comes into your house on television can't be the racist or the bad guy that others are trying to make him out to be.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Hank Sheinkoff, literally one of the smartest guys in the world. There's literally no one in American politics that I respect more, even though we are in different parties. We've been friends for, over 30 years. We're lucky to have him here today. Don't go away, folks, because we'll be right back with more of Hank Sheinkoff right here on The Roger Stone Show.
Talk Radio 77 WABC. It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. We're talking to Dr. Hank Sheinkoff, one of the most legendary Democratic strategists and consultants in the country, a advisor to presidents, union presidents, mayors, governors, senators. Hank has worked in over 700 campaigns. I respect his analysis perhaps more than any Democrat I know. Well, Hank always tells it to you straight. Hank, I see a realignment in the country when Dick Cheney and the McCain family and Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, for that matter, are endorsing Kamala Harris. Yet you see Robert Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Blagojevich, who joined us today, supporting Donald Trump. Something's going on there. How do you read that?
I think Roger, I think it's rather important you raise it. There is a realignment going on in classical academic terms. Critical election theory, the BOK, I think among the greatest American political scientists in the 20th century. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, the last century, he talked about critical elections where historical events would come together with political trends. He predicted that the South would become Republican in 1949. He said this. I mean, we're going through a critical election because the parties are falling apart. They become, in the case of the Republicans, much more personality dominant with Donald Trump, much more single issue directed. Okay, and the Democrat coalition of blacks, Latins, Jews, and labor unions is falling apart because it's perceived as more elitist and more related to the financial interests of Wall Street and the elites in Washington, New York, and in Los Angeles. So when you put that together, you have a Democrat Party that is less ideologically strong over time, less diverse, okay, and a Republican Party that is becoming yet to be identified in the future, but has a much stronger group of adherents that are prepared to protect it, while everybody else is trying to figure out what to do. The working class party of the country is no longer Democrats, is my point. It is Republicans. And that is a very important thing to note.
All politics is local, and therefore I have to ask you this question. Mayor Eric Adams under fire. Again, we stress that an indictment's not a conviction, and you're innocent until proven guilty, but he does seem to have serious problems. And he is charged with taking $10 million from Turkey illegally and then submitting that through New York City's campaign matching fund system for a 10-to-1 match. That is not the upgrade of an airline ticket. That's a serious charge. We give him the benefit of the doubt because that's how our system works. But if he should either choose not to run or be forced out, and the city moves for the first time to ranked choice voting, how do you see that playing out?
Very tough election for anybody. I mean, ranked choice voting, let me back it up. I mean, the wonderful thing about reform is that every reform has an elitist bias. So when you reform the education, you reform the electoral system, you're really making sure that less people can figure out what to do because voting is habitual and ritualistic. So ranked choice voting upsets the whole thing. It gets rid of runoffs, maybe, because you have a runoff anyway. It's an instant runoff. Is that good? It's probably not. Can Adams win again? The answer is yes, because he's not convicted, because he's an African American. If he can figure out how to deal with the crime issue, which is overblown in some ways and not in others, because if you're the victim of a crime, it's not overblown. If he can prove that he can deal with that and move those numbers down some, he's going to be difficult to beat if he's not convicted. It's why? Because he's the incumbent mayor. And the last time, let's see, in the last 80 years, only 2 incumbent mayors have been defeated after one term. David Dinkins in 1993 by Rudolph Giuliani, and Abe Beame in 1977 by Ed Koch. It doesn't happen. Normally what happens is when a guy's in trouble, the governor of the state of New York has a full authority to remove the mayor at will, frankly, almost at will, takes the guy aside and says, hopefully the woman one day aside and says, by the way, you got to go. And there was a guy named Dwyer whose mayor suddenly disappeared to be the ambassador to Mexico. Then we had Jimmy Walker, who Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, Jimmy, get out of town. And he did, but it's more complicated. Adams will win that race probably. Why? Because he's the mayor, if it were to happen, so long as he's not convicted.
Very interesting. I wrote a long piece on ranked choice voting. We could have a half an hour here, and we still couldn't explain it to people. It's that complicated. It's that difficult to explain. But everybody, in essence, gets 2 votes. You get to vote for your first choice and your second choice, and then you add them up. I personally think it's a mistake. I think it favors the elites. I like one man, one vote, plurality, no runoffs in primaries, a straight general election. But, I don't make the rules in New York City. Still an extraordinarily expensive place to run for mayor, extraordinarily expensive. And I would think that in a multi-candidate field, a Hispanic candidate, and I couldn't name who that is, but a Hispanic candidate might have the best chance of upsetting the mayor.
I think that's right, because that is a one ethnic group or one group. All urban politics is about competition between groups for resources, right? They're the one group that has not yet had an elected person citywide, an elected person statewide, besides, President Lieutenant Governor, which runs on a ticket. There's no real primary there. That doesn't have a major player on the courts. And it's the time. And, if you go back in New York history of the 60s, Herman Badillo tried to get elected mayor, 4 times? Impossible. So could the Latinos, if they can come together, the Hispanics come together as one group? It's a problem. They could, but it's too diverse. I mean, many Hispanics live in Queens, but in Queens alone, you have 170 languages spoken. And you have all kinds of different dialects from people who come from all different parts of the entire Latin American universe, which people in North America seem to think is uniform and everybody's the same, but they're not. It's a problem. But yeah, you're right. That could be the only way that Adams immediately is removed. I mean, and the Asians they're not going to coalesce under any circumstance, because it's 2 diverse cultures in competition with each other economically at home and here. It's very interesting to watch, though.
Well, I'm sorry to say that we have to leave it there. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Hank Scheinkoff, a political strategist extraordinaire, for joining us on The Roger Stone Show. And also, folks, ask you to stand by, because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along. This guy has an incredible set of pipes himself, but he'll be playing the music of the great Frank Sinatra with Sundays with Sinatra.